Shalom. Um, I have been trying to. Um, why can't I find this? Okay, there it is. Why is this not working? Oh, there it is. Okay. Uh, I have been. Okay, there we go. Trying to integrate what I am understanding about the Dead Sea Scrolls, especially after reading Mikitsat Maseh Torah, which is MMT. And um, two of the people who have been dealing with trying to integrate this into what we know about history, James Tabor put out a video today, and I'm reading Robert Eisenman's book. And the fact is that in today's society, I think two things have become somewhat clear. I think the Dead Sea Scrolls are a miracle, and anybody who believes in God should take notice. Finding the Dead Sea Scrolls has changed the field upon which we have our theological discussions. And I think also we have to take notice of what is going on in our society. And I keep on coming back to Galatians 3, the end of the chapter 23. Before the coming of this faith, we were held in custody under the law, locked up until the faith that was to come could be revealed. So the law was our guardian until Christ came, that we might be justified by faith. Now that this faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian. So in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you were baptized into Christ, who were baptized into Christ, have clothed yourselves in with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. And I think anybody that looks at what is going on in the world notices that the parts of this verse that are most obviously false. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Obviously can't mean what a lot of people would like it to mean. And I think to some extent James Tabor's video today about Jude and James, the brother of Jesus, and a realistic understanding of what exactly the Dead Sea Scrolls mean in terms of Christianity, also point to something in Judaism that's, frankly, I think as many Jews have difficulty with as Gentiles. Um, Epistle 25 in the back of Tanya is coming up in the annual Tanya cycle. And again, this is something I've started talking to a bunch of people with, including Jews and Gentiles. I have to bring up the famous letter of Rabbi Yitzchak Kaduri, which was publicized a year after his death. From everything I can see, no, it is not a forgery. And the letter was regarding the name of the Messiah. And what he left was Yarim Ha'am ve'yochiach shedavaro ve'torato omedim. And I think anybody who has eyes to see can understand what Hey and Vav stand for. And I think especially during Sukkot, anybody who has eyes to see should understand what Ayin could stand for. And Dilemaven, somebody who understands, and who has eyes to see, has eyes to see. I think something is going on right now. Something very obvious is going on right now. And it's very common for Jews to quote, Shvoch Hamatcha al Hagoyim, and just say Shvoch Hamatcha, and if you're lucky, al Hagoyim. But there's the rest of that verse. Asher lo yaducha ve'asher b'shimcha lo karau. And this is also in Jeremiah, and obviously it's also in the Haggadah. There is a spiritual difference between Jew and Gentile. Judaism clearly teaches this. Ata bachartanu mikol ha'amim, ahava yetera ahavta otanu. There is male and female in the world. There is slave and free in the world. And there is Jew and Greek in the world. And this is a difficult thing for a lot of people. Something they would like to deny. And two incidents come to mind. Christopher Hitchens liked to quote about that there was a letter in the Israeli Defense Forces newsletter from a rabbi asking the question, can we kill Gentiles? And Christopher Hitchens was very, very upset at this. I haven't seen the letter, but I will tell you, I know very clearly what the answer is. And you should know very clearly what the answer is. The answer is no. And the other incident, in fact, one of them I think had converted to Judaism, at least conservative Judaism, where scholars were talking about how one of them was at the Great Synagogue. I forget if it was in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and the rabbi was giving a shiur, was giving a class about Maimonides and what he had to say about the lives of Gentiles. And honestly, I had a similar experience. There has been an attempt to write a Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law for Gentiles, and when you open it up, as is correct for a halachic work, it starts with what exactly is the status of the life of a Gentile. And honestly, I can see a lot of people opening that book and being offended. What I told Yosef is it's not ready for prime time. And these discussions, unfortunately, are not ready for prime time because a lot of people are not willing to have the discussions. No, Kanye was not right. That's the problem. A lot of people don't, including Jews. And what I told one person was, I have to scream at Jews about this. So I'm going to, I take it's not about your blood, DNA, and culture by extension. No, it is not about culture. It is not about blood, and it is not about DNA. Although I do have to say, I do wonder if it may be about mtDNA, because there is a spiritual difference between Jew and Gentile. This is just as there are spiritual differences between men and women, and there's a very real difference between slave and free. And if you take what Paul says to be how most Christians have taken what Paul says, first of all, you have a very hard time integrating it with Acts, integrating it with James, integrating it with Jude, integrating it with what we know about early Christianity and what we now know about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I mean, you can see my discussion with Sam Adams about MMT and what is going on regarding Paul within Judaism. If you are going to reconcile Paul with Judaism, which I think is a good idea, I cannot reconcile Paul with Judaism because I think Paul was teaching a different gospel than Jesus was teaching. And I think he was teaching a different gospel than James and Jude and the apostles were teaching. And I think that's clear. But if you hope to reconcile Paul with early Christianity, then you have to reconcile Paul with a Judaism, which most Christians are not really, not mRNA, mtDNA, mitochondrial DNA. That's something else. Did I even translate what Rabbi Kaduri's letter says? Yarim Ha'am, he will raise up the nation, ve'yochiach, and prove, shedevaro, that his word, ve'torato, and his teaching, omdim, stand. Honestly, it's difficult to have this discussion by myself because I don't know what I am making clear and what I am not making clear and what I am capable of making clear and what I am not capable of making clear. But the Bible, if you believe in it, makes a clear distinction between Jew and Gentile. Tentihu li mamlechet kohanim, you will be for me a nation of priests. And that is a priesthood you can join, but you cannot leave. And the reason that the book of Jonah is Maftir Yonah, is the final Torah reading at some Joshua will come back. It's controversial, rather. It's our Josh or not. I don't think that's what Rabbi Kaduri was saying. I think somebody who has a solid grounding in Judaism should understand what I mean when I pick out those particular letters in those particular colors. And I hate to say that I believe I have decoded what Rabbi Kaduri was trying to reveal, but I have to say I think I may have decoded what Rabbi Kaduri was trying to reveal. And for further guidance, I would recommend looking up what the Ben Ish Chai has to say about Esav and Tammuz and Av and Elul. And Rabbi Kaduri's letter was written in Elul. No, it has nothing to do whatsoever with blood, although it does have to do with Jesus. That I am talking about things which are way beyond my understanding. If people want to come on and discuss this, let me put a link in the chat. And we can, but when it comes down to it, I think if you are paying attention to the Dead Sea Scrolls and you are paying attention to the world in which we live, it should become very, very clear to you how silly the understanding, nor is there male and female. I mean, I keep on, what is a woman? What is a woman? What is a woman? Roman! Understanding. No, you are echoing.
Am I echoing?
Not anymore. I think. Yeah,
Oh, right.
you
I
had.
had the other tab open. I had to close it. It's okay. So read something to do with Jesus. I have heard about this before. I thought it was very cool how this guy had this little acrostic about how it's going to be Yehoshua, right? Which was kind of neat.
So, the first letters are Yud, He, Vav, Shin, Vav, Ayin. And the reason I put Yud, Shin, Vav in red is because that is how Jesus is traditionally written in rabbinic text, and no, it is not flattering at all. And what is left is Vav and He and Ayin, and I am not going to explain that because it is not my place to explain that. But he who has eyes to see should be able to see, and he who does not should go study more Torah.
Okay, well, that's certainly true. I should study more Torah.
I'm not trying to be cryptic. It's just an attempt by me to explain it any further than I have is a mistake. I will put that up. We have discussed that.
Yeah.
I can put that up. We have discussed that.
Yeah. It seemed like it had some relationship to do with the name of God, the Vav and the Hey, but I don't know what that relationship is exactly. It seems
Well, if you don't know what that relationship is, then there's no point in me talking to you about a letter that Rabbi Kaduri left to be opened up after a year after he died.
Yeah. I know that some people are like, no, it could just be that it's Joshua, that like somehow like Joshua from like, after Moses is like
the content he would not have written something. And first of all, there's the whole, I mean, there are lots of people who will argue that it's not an actual letter from him. I don't believe that. But he would not have picked random words. What he is trying to say would have included the words and what he was saying. And the question becomes, does it have a reference to Jesus? And I think it does. And the question becomes, what is that reference to Jesus? And I think what he was trying to say is that Christianity is missing the Vav and the Hey and the Ayin.
Huh. Okay. That is interesting. A lot of that's missing. I don't, unfortunately, what's interesting is the negative space that I don't quite understand.
And this is why, I mean, these are things which are taught in riddles, not really riddles. I think to somebody who has even a as basic an understanding as I do, which is a very basic understanding, what I am saying is very clear. And if it's not, then I may be saying complete BS. And so either what I am saying resonates with people who have eyes to see and ears to hear, or it's BS. So there's no point in me explaining to people who have no eyes to see and no ears to hear.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Okay. So, right. So I understand that like he didn't reveal it till after he died, so it was going to be controversial.
A year after he died. No.
Yeah.
There's a difference between after he died and a year after he died. And I will point out, if Rabbi Kaduri had decided to announce that he believed in Jesus and was now converting to Christianity, not only would he not have lost any status among most people, he would have instantaneously become one of the most beloved people in the world, incredibly wealthy, with probably hundreds of thousands, if not tens of thousands of Jews, but hundreds of thousands of Jews converting to Christianity with him. And all like the Protestant, the evangelicals would lose. The evangelicals already lost their mind. The evangelicals would have so completely lost their mind, he would have become the Christian leader of like millions of Christians immediately. So the idea that he was a secret Christian who didn't want he didn't want to lose status and had worldly fears is completely ridiculous.
Okay. My understanding is that I think about the words it said, and it seems like it's drawing a dialectic between there's just Jesus guy, and there's this stuff that people seem to think about Jesus, which is that he took the law away, and it says the opposite, which seems to be like what he's. It's the part that I seem to understand, that I think I understand.
Hey, Michael.
Hello.
It
sounded like a.
You're wrong, Roman. That's not what I was trying to say at all. What do you think, Michael?
I missed the last little bit while I was trying to get on the stream.
It wasn't important.
Roman was saying that. Go ahead. Tell him what you were thinking. That I said was.
So like what he so like it's an acrostic, right? And the acrostic says something like part of what it says is like he will affirm the people and maintain the law, or something like this. And I was like, oh right, so it's like
simple. He will raise the nation and prove that his words and his Torah stand.
Right. Which means that the law still stands, right? So it's not like the law doesn't exist.
That's obvious. I mean, this is the thing. Rabbi Kaduri was very, very firmly ensconced in Judaism. Yes, he was the foremost Kabbalist alive during his time, but he was very, very firmly ensconced in Orthodox Judaism. And if he had decided to leave Orthodox Judaism, if he had decided anything, hundreds of thousands of people, at least tens of thousands of people, but hundreds of thousands of people, and possibly millions of people. I'm telling you, if he had decided to convert to Christianity, if he had come out as like some kind of evangelical or Roman Catholic or whatever, tens of thousands of people would have followed him, like that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to argue that he was secretly a Christian.
A secret Christian?
Like,
well, yeah, that's what Smith Bailey and a lot of Messianics were arguing, was that he was a secret Christian and he was just afraid to announce it, and that's why the letter was sealed until a year after he died. No, well, the reason that the letter was sealed until a year after he died is because a year is considered the maximum amount of time you spend in hell before getting in purgatory, before being purged of your sins.
So because he was afraid people would misunderstand, is this the idea? And he would face some
that's part of it, but also he may have been afraid that any mistakes he had would have tainted the message, and so after a year of purgatory, his life force would be purged of his sins.
Okay, that's interesting.
So, Michael, you jumped on. What were you thinking?
Is this what the whole conversation was about? I just saw that you were on. I didn't listen to the previous.
The conversation was about Galatians 3. That's the main thing of the conversation, where I think Galatians 3:28, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. The interpretation that most Christians have given to that verse for the past 2,000 years, I think just the whole trans issue shows how false it is. And I think the Dead Sea Scrolls further show how false it is. And if you are going to reinterpret that verse so that it does not mean anything ridiculous, so that Paul goes back into Judaism, so that the Jewish teachings are what they are, then you have to go back to what makes sense of Acts 21, which is that a Jewish Christian should still be circumcising their children and not eating pork.
Okay, so to me,
yeah,
my feeling about this is something like you should do that stuff, and the reason would be that a different sort of argument they make in that Paul makes, which is about the eating meat from idols thing, which is that you shouldn't be doing things that violate your conscience anyway. This is very bad for you, right?
This is Paul within Judaism, and if you're going to accept Paul within Judaism, that means that while Gentile Christians can eat ham to their heart's content, Jewish Christians most certainly cannot. And that's the most expansive Paul within Judaism thing. And look, there's a reason why Sam argues against it, because he has seen the result, and the result becomes, guess what? Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians will have different meals, will not share table fellowship in ways that are obvious.
Mm.
And I realize this is much more of a live issue in your life, Michael, than it is in most people's lives.
Oh, right, because his wife is Jewish.
And his
I'm having bad reception, so it was hard for me to catch all that, but I think I got most of it.
So this seems like part of your life too, right? Like you don't practice like you could because you feel like it would alienate you from your family, right?
Well, I mean, that's a whole different thing. I don't practice like I would like to, for many reasons. And there's a difference between realizing, okay, you know what, this is God did not make me somebody who is worthy of living a life of prayer and Torah study like I would like, for his reasons, and what exactly those reasons are, that's up to him. But recognizing at the same time that for whatever that means to my life, that doesn't change the fact that I don't think I should ever eat pork. I don't think I should ever drive my car on the Sabbath or Jewish holidays. I think that I should spend 2 hours a day in prayer, and at least, and probably a lot more. The fact that I don't personally do those things, or feel like I am in a place in my life where I should, has no bearing whatsoever. So I had a Christian ask me once how I felt about the fact that even when I was absolutely religious, so my reading of Hebrew, because I learned Hebrew really in college and afterwards, so I read Hebrew a lot more slowly than, let's say, Chezi or Yosef do, right? And so Yosef can say the entirety of the prayers every day, um, and lucky enough for him, the prayers he has to say are actually shorter than the prayers that my tradition has. So I was never able to, on rare days, I would say the entirety of my prayers, because frankly I would be spending all day praying if I was doing that, and I was just too slow, and it made no sense for me to do that. That's not anything any rabbi ever told me is a good idea, right? Because, and so I was talking about this, and this Christian's like, well, how'd you deal with that? And I'm like, God is infinite, I'm finite, what's the problem? And this is something you understand in Judaism, right? So the keeping every minute detail of the law is pretty much impossible. So if you read the book of James the way we basically read halacha, and this is what MMT changed for me. So when I started reading the Gospels and recognizing Jesus saying the same things that we expect in Jesus saying the same things that I understand from Judaism. I was like, oh, Jesus was this person who was a breakaway from the Essenes and a breakaway from the other Christian community and the broader community, and he was a lone person who was basically teaching Torah the way Torah needed to be taught. And MMT, as I have been digesting it, like I no longer view James and Jude to be completely divorced from Judaism the way Paul was. And that's interesting and weird thing, right? That there were early Christians who.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well with.
Oh yeah, your sound is kind of weird. Let me. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I brought down your sound because we can hear the air behind you, Michael. That's why.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So, but that's a completely different discussion than whether within Christianity, right? I don't consider myself a Christian because there's still things I think even James and Jesus taught, which now reconsidering Jesus and reconsidering James, I don't know what James. I don't know what I think of James. I am reconsidering what I think of James. But when it comes down to it, if I believe in Judaism and what has the Dead Sea Scrolls have changed about my feelings about Judaism is the idea that um, the Christians, the early Christians, were a lot closer to actual Judaism than I ever thought.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like if you read James, it sounds a lot like almost like almost a little like Proverbs. That's how kind of how it reads to me. Like even when he says all the stuff about the rich people, like how all their stuff is going to go away. That's like it's still like telling them, oh hey, you know, you need to consider your future. You need to be wiser.
Look, I'm guessing that the Book of James is a translation by somebody other than James. I don't think James wrote it in Greek, and from what I hear, it's in very good Greek, to the point where people think that it might have been composed in Greek. Same question goes with the Book of Jude, right? But what if you saw James Tabor's video today? As Tabor understands it, he sees Jude, James, and Jesus as being much closer to Orthodox Judaism than Pauline Christianity. And he is one of the experts on Paul who's actually kind of seems to like Paul. And he seems to actually think Paul was a sort of upgrade on Jesus, which is weird, but he does seem to believe that.
I mean, it seems like it sort of completes the story, especially if you think that like if you really buy into the whole Jesus is perfect, Jesus follows the law perfectly, then you have Paul's the sinner, and he gets to repent, gets to turn back, and like sort of like you get the other half of it, right? Since you're probably not perfect like Jesus, but you can probably repent like Paul, right?
Okay, but you know what? Then late Paul, then you have to have an idea of late Paul, like Paul in Acts 21 repenting of Galatians.
And Galatians, you're talking about the whole. What in Galatians offends you exactly? Is it specifically the
Pretty much
his?
all of it.
Okay.
Like the idea that the law is our jailer and we're free. Like you're. Oh
He
wow!
doesn't
I
say
did
it's a
not even
jailer. He says it's
consider
just
this until right now. What you? What? Oh, Michael. Nah. Michael needs a better connection when he does this. I did not even consider this until now. So for me, a huge question has been, why did Luke not finish off Acts with the end of the life of Paul? And my joke has been because Paul, in when he was in Rome, um, gave up Christianity and went off to be the governor of Spain or something as an idolater. And I just considered what the other possibility might be, why Luke might not um why Luke might not have wanted to give the rest of story of Paul, which is Paul may have in fact repented completely and gone back under the guidance of James and Jude and Simon, the family of Jesus. And so Luke basically kind of had to write him off.
Okay. I mean, I don't know exactly what was going on with that. So like that could have been the case, right? He could have gone and been a good Jewish Christian, or he could have gotten killed by the Romans. He didn't want to write in that part because he was trying to appease the Romans. I don't know what was going on. No idea.
Wow, the idea that Paul actually repented. That's wow. That would totally redeem Paul for me.
It's a cute idea. I like it.
He's back.
yeah. Well, I think it's not working right. I don't think.
Yeah, let me put go ahead and put your mic settings back and see if you can make them work.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, I think
Can you hear
so.
me?
I can hear you. The thing is, the sound that I hear isn't necessarily
Better?
the sound that everybody else hears. And he's gone again.
He just
And
freezes
he's
every few
back.
seconds.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
I think I
Okay,
just have spotty connection out here.
you're driving in the middle of nowhere, Texas.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, not really, but I'm in the city. But
Well, when you're driving, just the fact that you're driving makes it difficult for your cell phone company. Okay, Roman, it's all you. What do you have to say
All
for yourself?
me. What's up? Oh, right. So, okay. The Vav, the Hay, and the Shen. I don't know what those
And the
mean.
IN.
The Ayin. The Vav, the Hay, and the Ayin. I think it has something to do with you showed the little thing that has the word for truth. So it might have something that Christians are missing the truth.
No, that wasn't what I should.
That's not helping.
No,
Yeah.
you're not gonna guess at this.
Yeah, I doubt it. But I'll definitely go look into that. You wanted me to look at some point the Benish chai. I've got it open
Benish
and
Chai.
yeah, it's showing me this guy with a turban.
Yeah,
Chaim
I don't
Yosef
think
Chaim of
Chaim.
Baghdad. Chaim. Yeah, it's that Chaim thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you can do is just drop the C and just like if you just do a hey, ha,
Mhm.
Chaim, you're much better off than Chaim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he has something to say about these letters, and one day I might know
About
what it
the
is.
letters shin and ayin, yes.
Okay. Um. Yeah. So this is weird because I know it's not supposed to be cryptic, but you also don't really want to say what it is. And the guy didn't even want to say what it was because maybe he was worried about it was bullshit, right? Maybe he was. I don't know, right?
Well, I mean, there is that, but there's also the concept of if I have to explain in this level of detail, you just already don't have enough foundation. It's like when somebody asks you to explain why y equals mx plus b, what when you're discussing slope, and it's like if you don't already know y equals mx plus b, why am I trying to what like why am I trying to teach you, like I'm trying to teach you about derivatives being
Yeah,
the slope of the tangent to a circle, and you don't know y equals mx plus b,
because you don't
and so
understand
like
slopes. Yeah,
it's like why am I even bothering?
yeah, yeah. I understand. It could just be like not worth it, or even some things
No, like
you have to
in order
have
for
more
you to
integrated
understand
understanding.
at that
Yeah.
level, you have to understand all of the things behind it. And
Hmm.
anybody who's interested in understanding even the basics, like go ahead and learn arithmetic and times tables and algebra, and then we can discuss calculus,
Yeah.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
One of
I'm,
these
I'm not
days
trying
I'll
to
have to
be
do it.
simplistic and I'm not trying to be an asshole,
I
but
know you're not.
the people who
I totally get
understand,
it.
understand, and the people who don't understand need to go back to basics.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have suddenly I'm like out of ways I think I can contribute is all. If we can get somebody who knows calculus, maybe you can talk to him about it. But I'm
Um,
not that guy.
I mean, I do kind of wonder if uh, aha. Um, yeah, I mean, and honestly, I wasn't even sure I was going to include that whole bit, but there
Mhm.
are some people in my audience who know enough, who may be interested in it, and
It sounds very
I
cool.
I would like to actually hear, like, I don't know, I think, for example, David that I had the long discussion with might actually understand what I'm saying, but I'm not sure he's watching this. Um and there are other people. But like
Yeah.
when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, I think there's a very real issue here of if we are going to understand Christianity and Judaism. And part of the problem is I'm screaming at Jews about things like this letter, by um, I'm screaming at Jews about this letter, and its meaning, and I'm kind of screaming a little bit at a few Gentiles about it as well. And part of it is understanding that whatever Galatians 3 means, it does not mean that there's no difference between Jew, Gentile, slave, free, and male and female.
Okay. So you said before you think it's like a caste system. Like there's the Jews are part of the caste, and then there's like you have your priests and your kingly people
So
and
within Judaism, we
right.
have a hereditary priesthood, and we have
Mhm.
hereditary Levites, and we have Israel, right? Which is
Right.
everybody else.
Mhm.
And this is something we've maintained. And it doesn't mean that, like, I mean, I have friends who are Kohanim, right? There are
Mhm.
people who are Kohanim. That doesn't mean they're necessarily much better people, and certainly it doesn't mean. And this was one of the things I was talking about in one of my chatting streams about, like the Aga Khan, right? Like having hereditary leadership. Um, having the hereditary priesthood by the time of the Talmud, it was, and even I would say by the time of Jesus, it was very, very clear that a hereditary priesthood, while it may have a certain necessity and goodness to it, at the same time, creates all kinds of problems because there's nothing to say that the child is actually going to be, as a great person. And that's why, like, the Mishnah is very, very clear about, like, a mamzer talmud chacham, right, a scholar who is a bastard, right, and the meaning there is very different, but a mamzer, it's usually translated as bastard, is a more important person and deserves more respect than Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz. Even if the high priest, if he's an unlearned boor, which he may be because it's a hereditary position, or you have a king, right, and he inherited the position, and he's an obvious, donkey. It's
Sure.
like,
So even the New Testament talks about this, right? I've said this before about the birds and the branches, right? Evil people can be in charge. Evil people can be in charge of righteous organizations, right? This is a reality,
what
and we
talks
have to
about
accept that this can happen. What's up?
what talks about this? You said something talks about this.
Yeah. So Jesus talks about. So he talks about the parable of the sowers, right? And one of the things he talks about is when you sow the seed, some birds come out and take up the seed, right? And this is the evil forces of the world, right? And then later he talks about how what like eventually, right, a tree will grow, right? And I tend to think the tree is Jesus, but often the tree is the church, right? And at the top, and the birds will rest in the branches, i.e., evil forces of the world will be in charge of the church sometimes. That's how it is. Get over it. And yeah, that's reality. And so if the truth is that there is a spiritual sense, maybe even in the Messianic age, where the Jews are in charge, then I'll make peace of that, right? But that's what that means, right? That doesn't mean that they're better people or whatever, right?
And honestly, it doesn't even mean being in charge necessarily. Like, this is something that we've been struggling with. What exactly does it mean? Mamlachet Kohanim,
Mm-hmm.
a nation of priests, right? And that this is another thing, like, our society is dealing with outside the religious framework, but needs to
Mm-hmm.
understand within the religious framework as well, which is secularity is a Jewish idea. The idea that you have a separation between the king and the priesthood, right? This was the reason the books of the Maccabees did not make it into the Jewish Bible, because the Maccabees as priests wanted to be the kings, right? And the rabbis were like, nope, sorry, it doesn't work that way. And even though the exilarchs were all not great people, right? At the same time, the he stopped driving. Um,
Yeah. I'm not driving now, so
at the same time, the exilarchs, they had the hereditary priesthood to them, and so I don't think that really Jews, like, I don't envision a world in which, well, it's funny, like, Christians envision a world in which there's a Jew who rules over the entire world much more than Jews do, because um, Maimonides actually quite clearly says that's not what's going to happen when the Messiah comes. There, while there will be a temple and it will be a spiritual, like, Jerusalem will be the spiritual head, headquarter of the world. That doesn't mean that, like, Jews are going to be ruling over the world. Um, but spiritually, yeah, I think there is a form of priesthood which is hereditary in Judaism.
Okay, but like, what is for you? Like, what is the role of the priest? What does the priest do for you? What do you do for the priest? What is your relationship with the priest?
I think it has to, the analogy has to turn on what happened in the temple, which is when a Gentile wanted to bring a sacrifice, and Gentiles were allowed to bring sacrifices to the temple, right? The priest would take it and sacrifice it and sprinkle the blood on the altar and da 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 da. And there is a service in the temple, and there is a spiritual guidance as well that was done through the temple. And I think I ultimately, I mean, what I think is going to happen when the Messiah comes is that there is going to be that relationship that Israel will continue to be a small nation among the entire world, but will be a nation of priests for the rest of the world.
Okay, so you think literally there's going to be a big temple. They're going to kill a bunch of animals. They're going to do it in a ritualistic way. They're going to know how to do it the right way.
Okay.
To like
literal animals, that's literal. It doesn't have to be literal animals, but there is.
You think it could be like a straw dog or something?
What it could be a what?
There's this ritual the Chinese have where they take a dog, not a real dog, a dog made of straw, and they almost treat it like an idol for like almost like a little bit like a Christmas tree, I guess. This is usually the analogy. They have they put gifts around it and stuff, and then after they're done with it, they throw it out. They throw it out into the yard. It comes from the Tao Te Ching, which is why people know about it. But that's like, is that the thing you're thinking about? Like we'll have they'll ritually kill a fake animal, and this will be the.
I don't know, and honestly, like it's not that. Like, yeah, you're making it too physical, and not like you're turning the allegory like this is what Maimonides makes fun of in his commentary to the Mishnah. He's like, people ask me like when the resurrection of the dead will happen, like will people wear their burial shrouds, or are they going to have to be tailors and people making new clothes for them, right? And he's like, you're missing the point.
So like to me, like you're envisioning a future, right? This is the whole thing. We're thinking about the future, and we're like,
right,
you're going to think there's going to be a literal temple. There's going to be a literal building. Maybe it'll be a Martian building.
There is going to be a literal building. Yes.
Yeah.
There is going to be a literal.
And there will literally be priests there. The priests will literally be human beings who are of a certain caste of Jews, and they will do a thing, which is going to be at least a little bit like the sacrifices described in Leviticus.
Maybe there may even be actual sacrifices. Like this is things that like rabbis argue about whether or not there will actually be sacrifices when the Messiah comes, and maybe there will, and people will think it's a great idea to like travel and have a barbecue with their family on Passover in Jerusalem, and yeah, it'll be beautiful. Why not?
I mean, I'm a vegetarian. I have objections, but if God wanted me to,
there are many Jewish vegetarians, and that is actually one of the objections, and there is a whole idea that there will that in fact, once the Messiah comes, we will all be vegetarians, which I am perfectly fine with.
We will sacrifice the broccoli at the temple, maybe.
There were meal offerings at the temple.
I know that some people would sacrifice like wheat. I think sometimes wine
and
or oil.
Fruits, and there was all kinds of and wine, and there were all kinds of so not necessarily with animals.
I guess in line with the other things Judaism does, like they don't. It's been a long time since Jews have stoned anybody, so it doesn't. It's not like it doesn't sound like total nonsense to me or anything. But but when I think about it, it always makes me think of I talked about this too about like Temple OS, and like this guy thought he could build the third temple as an operating system. What's up?
Yeah, I know. Yes, I've heard of it.
But when people made sacrifices at the temple, they're going to make like poetry and make like art and programs at the temple.
There were songs at the temples. Yes.
Yeah.
Michael's making that.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
We hear more of you, what appears to be you making lunch than your actual voice.
No, well, I'm working. I'm trying to not have get home at like 7 o'clock at night. So, but whatever you said in the previous hour about Paul, I'm sure you were wrong. So that's
actually, I mean. Roman brought up an idea that I'd never considered before. It's possible that Paul actually repented. Maybe that's why Luke didn't bother to tell the rest of the story. Maybe Paul repented and went back and listened to James and Jude and the family of Jesus and became was exorcised of the demon, which was making him write all these horrible things he wrote. That's a beautiful idea.
Horrible things that are the only reason why
it is.
We're having a conversation.
What is so you're really interested in this TTM, right?
MMT.
You called it NMT.
Yeah, MMT. Yes.
So what's so like they're talking about legal stuff? Is this what is interesting to you, that they were in some sort of legal tradition?
It was written in modern, like what you would call, it was written in Rabbinic Hebrew. Okay. It was written in Mishnaic Hebrew.
Okay.
Which means that whoever, like, as opposed to Paul and the idea that Paul studied under Gamliel, like, suddenly I'm thinking James studied under Gamliel, maybe? Like, maybe all of the brothers of Jesus and Jesus actually studied in one of the academies in Jerusalem, because, like, if James wrote that letter, he has, like, and this is, so what's his name believes James wrote that letter. Robert Eisenman believes James wrote that letter, right? And when you read Paul, when you listen to the Gospels and Jesus through the Gospels, it appears that Jesus knew enough about Judaism that he's speaking that language, right?
Okay.
And which was very surprising.
Yeah. Well, if you take the Gospels at their word, right, it says Jesus is like a 12-year-old and he's arguing with rabbis and stuff, right? This is
right. Yeah, which for me was like, okay, was this miraculous? Like, what was going on here? But now, if you take what basically James Tabor and Robert Eisenman are saying, no, it's like actually Jesus, his family, and his disciples actually, like, were raised within Judaism, understood Judaism very well. And it's just Paul and his followers who didn't understand Judaism at all.
you know,
That's why it's completely shifting how I view early Christianity.
okay. Well, I don't know why it's so weird to you that they might have believed this, unless you make assumptions about the Sadducees. I think a lot of people make, which are that the Sadducees didn't keep like an oral law, but I don't know that for sure. It's just an idea that somebody had.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, no, I mean, as and even like the Mishnah and the Talmud kind of, they have, well, see, okay, now I actually kind of feel bad about this. Like when I was studying Talmud, right? It would mention that well, we love you, Michael. Um it would mention the Sadducees and the heretics caring about things, and honestly most secular people who were looking at the Mishnah and the Talmud were like, oh, this is anachronistic, like the rabbis painting what was going on during the Second Temple, like everybody was kind of like them, you know? Do you understand what
Mhm.
I'm saying?
They're kind
um
of hinting that everyone was kind of like them.
well, they were assuming that everybody was like, the arguments that the Sadducees in the Talmud are, well, okay, you have to understand, in the Talmud it only talks about like the heretics. So the Sadducees, the word Sadducee is kind of like a byword for all of the heretics, and it lumps all of them together, right?
Okay.
And so, like, while there are some different words for different heretics, like
Mhm.
Epicurus, right, as an Epicurean, right, is one
Mhm.
of the words for heretic. Um, the Mishnah was collected 200 years after, like around the year 200. The
Mhm.
Babylonian Talmud was finished like around the year 500. So when you're reading the Mishnah and the Talmud, like they were painting the Sadducees or the heretics, whoever they were, as being very, very rabbinic. And the secular understanding and kind of my understanding was like, okay, they're kind of retrojecting anachronistically rabbi like heretics, like 200 years behind, 2 to 500 years before themselves. And it's like, you look at the MMT and it's like, no.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
uh,
so your understanding is that these rabbis would argue, and they would call each other heretics sometimes. Is this basically what I'm getting from this?
yeah, but even the heretics were very, very close to the Pharisees.
Well, yeah, it's the what is it? The something of small differences. The bigotry of small differences, something
Yeah,
like that.
the yeah, I always get it wrong too. The narcissism, soft, the
Yeah,
something
something like
like
that.
that. Yeah.
Um. So yeah, I sort of expect that, right? If they're arguing with each other. But but also like if it just means like a heretic, then there could be a million kinds of heretic, right? It could have been three guys who didn't like the oral law and they didn't keep it, right? Like, okay.
So yeah, I mean, this was a huge part of the question, was like, what exactly did these other people believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at first of all, I never, the idea that the library in Qumran was as extensive as it is, I did not realize how extensive it is until very recently, because I didn't realize how much sectarian, um, and frankly, I mean, we didn't know. A lot of these things were never published. Jacob calls most of his friends heretics. How will the historians view his live streams in 500 years? Yeah, I mean, I call Yosef a heretic all the time. God have mercy on his soul. He's a Zionist.
Is he really?
God have mercy, yes.
Oh.
He's a religious Zionist.
What's the understanding behind this? Like,
What do you mean?
okay, so like, here's a very naive my point of view on this, which is that sort of the Bible seems to say that like the reward to when they talk about like the people of the vineyard, it seems to be to me it seems to be implying that ultimately the reward for Gentiles and Jews is going to be the same. That's what it seems to me. But to me, it seems also kind of obvious that a lot of the Bible is about like how much land you guys get, how much land the individual tribes get. It seems to me that actually, like, you guys are promised all this land, and it seems totally reasonable that you
And
want
it's
it.
not that much land when you consider how small Israel really is.
Oh, like in the grand scheme of the world, it's nothing.
And
Right?
it's not like it's great land.
I suspect it was much better land 3,000 years ago, but yeah.
Well, because of location. Back when like it was. I mean, you have to realize it literally was like the center of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, much less so the exact center of the world.
Well, yeah, but like also, okay, you have like the fertile percent, and like, okay, what's there? Oh, it's like all the fruits and all the vegetables and the whole Garden of Eden, and then, oh, everybody lives there. Everybody takes their goats there. The goats tear the land up, and now it's a desert. It's pretty much how I feel is the Cliff Notes version of what I think happened. But
It was completely deforested after the Roman Wars.
oh, someone just came by and chopped up all. They burned it down. Is that the idea? They were like, we don't want anyone to live here.
I mean, so there is what Josephus says, which is the Romans ran out of wood for all the crucifixes.
I mean, okay, you crucify a lot of. Maybe it's not impossible. You hear some crazy.
Josephus claimed that they were crucifying 500 people a day during the wars.
Yeah.
He said he says literally they ran out of wood to crucify people, and even if they had wood, they had no place to put all the crosses.
So Revelation, right? It talks about like how there's going to be blood up to the horse's bridle. And it seems like there's something very similar, right? Isn't there something very similar in the Talmud? How the blood came up so high during the
in Beitar, yeah. So there are the stories in the Talmud about what happened during the destruction are very, very exaggerated. I mean, if you want to take those literally, nobody takes those literally. Like, I think something like millions of people were killed in Beitar or something, or even billions. Like huge numbers that city was never that big.
Okay. All right. Okay. So is that? But that's your full understanding about the MMT is that it's just like, oh hey, here's some legal stuff where we didn't expect there to be legal stuff. Is this the idea?
Yeah, I mean the actual contents. The only I'm kind of wondering. Apparently, I mean, I read it and it wasn't. The only thing that was maybe a little controversial. So it appears that they actually did not get married. They had some weird halachas, like Jewish laws, which I can kind of sort of understand, but would like reject. I think it's bad. Like, for example, they would not go to the bathroom on the Sabbath at all because they were like they seem to have thought of themselves as a military camp and had started to keep the regulations of a military camp. And in the Torah, it says like when you go out to war, every soldier should have a shovel and cover, their waists. Um, we're talking about um, MMT, which is a letter found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so, for example, the thing about not saving an animal during the Sabbath, right? If an animal falls into a ditch on the Sabbath, like the Pharisaic law is, yes, you save the animal. They were like, no, you don't, or they would not go to the bathroom on the Sabbath because you can't dig holes on the Sabbath. And they were like, okay, so I guess no going to the bathroom on the Sabbath. And it's like, no, that's like the Pharisaic law and healing on the Sabbath. I think they were against it, whereas they is the people, the Essene community, the community of Essenes at Qumran, whoever they were, including many people want to say they were the early Christians, like the family of Jesus. Or yeah, there's lots of people who believe that this is the early Christian community. And I mean, I understand their reasoning a lot better because there's actually like Jewish reasoning, whereas before it was like, where did these people come up with these ideas like celibacy? Well, yeah, celibacy makes no sense in Judaism except if you actually believe you're in a time of war, right? Like not getting married because you're going off to war, that's acceptable and understandable.
Well, that seems to be like the biblical argument too. Is like, oh right, Jesus is gonna come back tomorrow. You should be like praying and fasting all the time. It seems to be kind of the tone.
So their understanding, again, this is the Qumran community and their community rule, their understanding was that because there were going to be angels and all kinds of holy beings coming at any moment to like the Son of Man and his angels are going to come at any moment um to like wipe out the Romans. They were maintaining a level of purity which was not considered like this is how we should live our life. This is okay, we need to keep a level of, and they did not drink wine, they didn't eat meat, they like lots and lots of things that would not be considered normal Jewish things they were doing because of the impending war and the impending visitation of angels into that camp.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if this was like right before the Roman Jewish war, like I guess, like I mean, they were seeing God soon. Unfortunately.
So Michael says, doesn't sound like Jesus. Well, this is why my understanding previously had been maybe Jesus, and there is this idea. There are people who are saying that John the Baptist may have been raised in this community and then left it, and maybe Jesus left it as well. But as far as the way Eisenman, so that may be how Tabor is understanding it. Eisenman understands Jesus' family as actually being the leadership in this community. And he thinks that the Christian Bible was the Greek Bible was written in opposition to them. Whereas you could say that, oh, maybe Jesus and his family were actually Pharisaic resistance to this community and these people. There's a lot less information. There's not enough information to there are many lines you can draw through the points of information we have. And that's what a lot of different people are trying to do. And that was actually the interesting thing about that Catholic scholar who Catholic Dead Sea Scrolls scholar who's trying to understand all this stuff. And he had a bunch of ideas, which were interesting ideas. Don't necessarily think they were true, trying to integrate the information and understand it with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's funny, I actually think the Roman Catholics are ahead of the Protestants in digesting the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Have they done this? Should I be reading like some sort of like Dead Sea Scroll catechism that has some interesting stuff in it?
Catechism. So this guy Bergsma, I saw an interview about one of his books, which was very interesting. And so he is considered a legitimate Roman Catholic scholar. Father Eric said that he was that he really likes him, and it was like on a legitimate Catholic thing. And he's an actual scholar. He's an actual scholar of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm sure he understands them much better than I do. And he's been trying to integrate them into Catholic theology. And it was an interesting video. I'm interested to read his book, like after all the other books that I'm trying to read.
So Bergsma, how do you spell that? Do you know?
Bergsma.
Bergsma. On
Yeah.
Bergsma?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. The Lord of the Lord, John Bergsma, books by Dr. John Bergsma, St. Paul Center. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I put one of his books on my reading list. Let me see which book it was.
These are about mass readings, though. Oh, here we go. Jesus, the Old Testament Roots of the Priesthood. Was that it?
No.
Well, all this other stuff is about mass readings, man.
Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls, revealing the Jewish roots of Christianity.
Okay. Oh, I see this. All right.
Yeah, I saw an interview he did on YouTube about it, and he had interesting ideas.
What were his ideas?
He's the one who suggested that maybe John the Baptist had been sent because apparently this Qumran community may have taken orphans, that possibly he was orphaned, or as a young man he went to study at Qumran, and so he took an oath. So apparently part of the community rule was you have to take an oath that you would not eat food made by any other community. You would only eat there, right? Or and so when people were exiled from the community, they would be forced to eat only things that were grown in the wild and stuff. Now, I don't think Eisenman has a similar. I think Eisenman has a different interpretation, but this was the idea that this guy had. Another thing, apparently in the Gospel of Luke, there is a story about a young man wearing linen and like the linen garment being ripped off of him, and John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say he is a glutton and a drunkard. I don't know where that's from, but I'm guessing it's from the Bible. And so the question of linen was very expensive, right? People who only had some clothes, right, didn't have lots of clothes, wouldn't have linen. They would be wearing wool because linen was expensive. But apparently this guy was only wearing one garment of linen and nothing else. And that was always strange because it's like, why would that be? But apparently, this community, Luke 7 33 through 34. Yeah, Bergsma actually, so a lot of this is about Luke and Acts. Apparently, Luke and Acts are have people's understanding of Luke's and Acts have changed dramatically based on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
How so?
Again, this is like it. So there's that book which I have not read yet, Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls. There, and I do want to read Faith of the Apostles, which Father Stephen DeYoung wrote, and there are other attempts. I'm reading right now Eisenman, James, the brother of Jesus, and it's like 1,000 pages long. It's like 900 something pages long, and I'm on page 400 or something. Tabor's book, The Jesus Dynasty, I bought, and it's like next. It's in my house, but like there's a lot to digest here that very few people are actually digesting, because a lot of this stuff hasn't been published until very recently. All of these are very new books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, these are things which are coming down the theological pike that a lot of people do not even know about.
Okay, right. So my understanding about Luke, right, is that like at the beginning of Luke, he says, "Hey, I've taken all these other sources and all these other people who had all these opinions about what this Jesus guy, and I'm going to set the record straight." Right. This is what he says at the beginning, right? And so, like, to me, like this is like at best a secondary source. And so it's interesting that you pick Luke as like the thing that is being changed by the Dead Sea Scrolls, since I see it as like sort of downstream of these other sources.
There are all kinds of things which can be there are all kinds of things that can be said. Again, we have a lot less information than we would like, and a lot more people interpreting things in different ways. So Sartori says, I went to a Bible college that integrated the DSS as much as possible. I probably already have more of a Jewish concept of Christianity than a traditional dogmatic one. Quite possible. And frankly, anybody who's going to Bible college now, is you have to understand the Dead Sea Scrolls were not available when I went to college. They have only become largely available in the past 20 years or so. So even though they were found before then. And like I was telling Sam, look, I thought Strugnell was always an anti-Semite. And I thought that when he gave that interview with Haaretz, which is a major left-wing newspaper in Israel, where he went on his rant against Judaism, like, I thought, okay, this guy's always been a putz and a heavy drinker and has always been an anti-Semite, and now like his drinking exposed his anti-Semitism. Whereas having read MMT, now I'm thinking religious Christian reads the Dead Sea Scrolls, becomes a raving drunk and anti-Semite because all he understands about his religion has fallen apart.
So this is weird to me. So okay, so the Bible says something like in the New Testament says like the Jews have been given the word, right? Like literally, like this is their responsibility to keep the word. And and to me, like what you got out of the Dead Sea Scrolls, what I get out of the Dead Sea Scrolls is that congratulations, you kept the word really well. Um, but you're saying like no, this is actually like totally, Christianity destroyed with facts and logic, and I'm like, how? How is this going down? How does this work?
Christianity destroyed with facts and logic? Maybe not. Past 2,000 years of Christians understanding their own scripture destroyed with facts and logic? Yeah.
How come?
Because a lot of the interpretations just don't make sense anymore, knowing what was going on at the time, knowing what was actually. So when James says, right, that so Acts 21, when James says to Paul, we are all zealous for the law, right? Was that the rabbinic law, the Mishnaic law, or some pared down 5 books of Moses um, Sadducee version that did not include any of these ideas that are very well developed in the Mishnah and in rabbinic Judaism? Like a lot of Christians, they're like, oh, all this Jewish stuff, this is from hundreds of years after Jesus. And when Jesus went to the synagogue, it was nothing like today's synagogue. And like all these ideas that like Judaism's like only 1,000 years old. There are people who to this day will tell me Judaism's only 1,000 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, actually, guess what? Um, the Judaism of the synagogue that Jesus went to and the early Christians were zealous for was far, far, far more like modern Judaism than I imagined.
Okay. So in addition to all these books of the Old Testament, there's also significant amounts of Mishnah, I assume, is what you're saying? Is this what
Mishnah.
you're getting at?
So the Pharisee understanding
Mm-hmm.
was and continues to somewhat be that writing down the oral law is forbidden. What
Mm-hmm.
people would have is notes. What people would memorize, people would have mnemonics, and even the Mishnah itself is really meant to be a mnemonic to be memorized. But we believe that Rabbi Judah the Prince, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, was made an exception and started writing these things down, and we started writing these things down. And there are people who say, no, it is not possible to write these things down. Our understanding is that these types of teachings are continuations of what Moses taught to Joshua, taught to for down the generation.
Okay.
Uh,
So
the secular understanding has been this is the Pharisaic tradition of the scribes that was not that was one sect of Pharisees. And
okay.
now re-looking at it through the Dead Sea Scrolls, what a lot of people, and me included, start going is, no, actually it wasn't like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes and all of them were discussing the same thing. They were incredibly like modern Judaism.
Mm-hmm. Well, like Jesus talks about the resurrection with the Sadducee, right? So like, I don't know if there's a straightforward description of the resurrection, that shows up in the Old Testament. I'm pretty sure it doesn't show up in the Torah. And so
You
that seems,
ask, we do, as Pharisees, we believe that the Torah does give direct hints to the coming resurrection.
right. You give in a sort of like, well, I mean,
But
I
we're
can
not talking. No. But Roman, you're missing the point. That's something that we basically, okay, they may have disagreed on. The question becomes, did they disagree on like if a on details which have absolutely nothing whatsoever, like the Sadducees may have had similar ideas as the Pharisees about tithing and about washing hands and about a lot of things which are nowhere to be found anywhere in the Bible by anybody's ideas.
okay. And you think that no, they didn't? They basically agreed on everything, or they agreed within like 10% of each
No.
other?
They had disagreements, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, so let's talk about so some people play bridge, some people play Magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Magic the Gathering. Magic the
Right.
Gathering cards are very different from normal playing cards,
Right.
right? And basically, we thought the Sadducees and the Sadducees were the Pharisees were playing with playing cards, and the Sadducees were playing, some of them with tarot cards, and some of them with magic cards, and some of them with completely different cards. And who knows? Maybe they were playing bingo and dominoes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what we find out is, no, some were playing bridge, some were playing poker, but all of them were playing with the same playing cards that we thought were just Pharisee playing cards.
Which is the Torah and some amount of Mishnah, which may have been
No,
significant.
which is the Mishnah and the oral law and everything like that, which Christians for many, many years thought had nothing to do with anything Jesus or Christianity. They thought, oh, this is the rabbis, this is the scribes, these is the Pharisees that Jesus hated.
Yeah, I have a different opinion about Jesus and the Pharisees, but I think you just didn't believe me when I said this, but I really do think that's the thing that's going on. It's like a rhetorical thing where you set up this big but like competent bad guy so that like Jesus can be as competent as them by knocking them down. But not that they're the bad guys, because they understand it well, right? That's the idea. If they didn't understand it well, it wouldn't work.
Roman, you have to understand, you have been influenced by things that are already being influenced by the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Like today, for a lot of knowledgeable Christians, it's not a weird thing to say that Jesus was closest to the Pharisees. 50, 60, 100 years ago, that was considered absolutely ludicrous. Jesus hated the Pharisees. Yes, Jesus hated the Pharisees. He was either a Sadducee, or maybe he was something. He was an Essene, or maybe he was something else. But the Pharisees were the worst things in the world, and the leavening of the Pharisees and the oral law is all from Satan and evil and all that stuff. The interpretation of Christianity over the past 50, 60 years has changed, not just because of the Holocaust and Christians being like, maybe we should be nicer to the Jews, but also because of archaeology and because of everything else that happened. And so Christianity is understanding Jesus loves everyone, duh. Yeah, well, for many, many years, lots of people thought Jesus did not love the Jews. And yes, that sounds really weird to us, but this was mainstream Christianity.
So there's certainly been a lot of anti-Semitism over the last 2,000 years, uh, but I don't I don't know if that's. I know that you would say like, no, here's what they say in like Titus or whatever, and this is totally like, or and this is totally anti-Semitic and it's awful and okay.
Look, the gospel of the Jews, right? I was very happy. I don't know if you saw Sam's interview with that guy. With he did an interview with a professor about the Gospel of John, and like the guy he's an old man, and when they started talking, he says, "Well, the Jews," and he did that, and I just died laughing because it's like, yeah, in John, the Jews are precisely that. They're the Jews.
Okay. I know that this is like a common thing to be like, yeah, you say the people and then the people are like bad, but like I don't necessarily think that's how it
Have
works
you
all the
read the
time.
Gospel of John? In the Gospel of John, the Jews are evil.
I'm gonna have to reread the Gospel of John. I don't remember this being the case. I don't remember reading the Gospel of John and being like, oh, those awful Jewish people. But well, I'm gonna have to
Which
reread it again.
translation did you read? NIV's the Jewish leaders.
Okay.
NIV has changed the Jews to the Jewish leaders.
Okay. Well, I would tend to read the KJV, but
okay, the KJV still has the Jews.
As in like the Jews killed Jesus type of thing.
As in fear of the Jews. The apostles were hiding for fear of the Jews, as if they weren't Jewish themselves.
Okay, that is a little weird.
There was a whole theory that which was common, especially in Germany before World War II, which was that the Galileans were not Judeans. And so when it was talking about the Jews, it was talking about somebody completely different. So there were the Jews and there were the Galileans. And the Galileans were the good people. And the Jews were the bad people. And so Jesus and his apostles weren't Jews, they were Galileans.
They were funny speaking Jews, apparently. Okay.
I'm not saying these were great theories. I'm saying these were theories.
So you had this theory going for a while that like some of the gospels were written as sort of like thick irony. Like, of course, they weren't afraid of the Jews, they're afraid of the Romans. This is totally stupid. You gotta read between the lines.
I mean, this is kind of similar to what Eisenman says, although he actually thinks it was it was malicious Roman, like. Okay, so Eisenman has this idea that like Luke was this Roman who was like, haha, these stupid people. And he writes like the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Acts as like a weird, funny, cruel twist on the actual truth. Whereas I think maybe that other idea of Samizdat, right? The idea that so when you're under an authoritarian regime, you so in North Korea, right? If you want to say really horrible things about Kim Il Jong or whoever the ruler is, and you don't, and you're worried about getting caught, like in Stalinist Russia, samizdat, one of the methods they would use is they would be superlatively nice about how good Stalin was and how horrible Trotsky was, I guess, or whatever. And so people who were reading it would realize to to just reverse it, that it was in fact ridiculous. And what happened was, over the years, Christians kind of forgot that no, this is actually saying the opposite, and it's satirical.
Like you would say that like Stalin is building an Orthodox nunnery in Siberia when of course he's sending them to the Gulag in Siberia. Okay,
and so, for example, the idea that the centurion in is it in Acts, who built a synagogue, like if a Roman centurion actually built a synagogue, he would get fragged probably very quickly. Like, there is no Roman centurion who ever built a synagogue. That just did not happen.
Where does it say a centurion built a synagogue? That's an interesting, even like as a story, like you got to wonder what was going on.
Luke 7.
Centurion 7. Okay, Luke 7.
Here, I'll pull it up.
All right.
Luke 7. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him and turned to the crowd following him. He said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Well, the only reasonable understanding of this is it's sarcastic. The centurion would not have Jesus into his house because he would never have a filthy Jew come into his house. And the servant, Jesus healed the servant even from outside, even when the centurion would not allow filthy Jesus. And so it's obviously superlatively, sarcastically telling the story in an opposite manner.
Okay, that's actually kind of funny. Like if you think about it that way. Okay, that's a little funny. I could believe that was a joke. To say that instead of like saying, "Oh, hey, you don't need to come in because you're so powerful," he's really saying, "Stay the fuck outside," right? I could sort of see it.
Yeah, and then Jesus says, "Oh, I have not seen such faith even in Israel of an effing centurion." Like,
like even that sounds sarcastic, right? Like, oh, you think you're going to be so good on Judgment Day, treating me like this? Like you could sort of see it that way. Yeah.
I mean, so that is a reasonable explanation of what happened. What is not reasonable is the idea that like a centurion was sending money to to build synagogues, and then when when Jesus is coming to him, he's like, "Oh, no, I don't deserve for you to come under my roof." It's like, yeah, he would, of course he wouldn't let Jesus into his house. Would you let some Jewish dog into your house?
Some Jewish dog. That's So you think I'm trying to think about how that works because they're under occupation. There had to be some relationship going on. Um, uh, like that idea that that was the relationship is not unreasonable. I don't know exactly what it was though, right? Um, huh.
Michael says it's not unreasonable. There's always exceptions, such as Naaman. No, it's completely unreasonable. If a centurion acted that way, he would have been murdered.
Why do you? I'm trying to understand like how you can be that sure about it that he would have been murdered.
Because do you know how centurions worked? Do you know how you became a centurion? Have you heard of the word decimate?
I have heard of the word decimate, and I've heard of where it came from. Like they would kill like a
Where
tenth of
did
the
it
people.
come from? It
My
came from
understanding is, yeah, like when they
the
punished the soldiers for like losing a battle, they'd like kill a tenth of the people.
right. So there was a century, right? A
Mm-hmm.
century is 100, and
Mm-hmm.
then there were decimals, right? There were tens, so it was 10
Mm-hmm.
tens,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Right.
anytime a century was to be censured, they would choose lots, and 10 of them would be forced to kill each other.
Okay.
And like in order to be the centurion, you were picked as the leader by the other members of the century. And if you were to build a synagogue, they would have killed you. There is no centurion ever built a synagogue. That did not happen. And if he did, his soldiers would have killed him. So like, yeah, that's not a story that
Okay.
happened.
You think it is so spectacular that if it did happen, it would have at least been like mentioned in some like Mishnah somewhere.
By
That wow, there's
Josephus,
like
it would have been mentioned. It would have like, and for it to be well known that he was a friend of the Jews, like a
okay, yeah, that
centurion.
sounds okay, yeah, that kind of does take it a little bit, right? Like, okay, secretly, I like these Jewish people. I sneak them some money sometimes. Versus like, oh, it's well known that he loves the Jews so much. That's that does seem a little much.
Hey Garth, Michael's trying to protect this, but he's already the top dog. There would be that would be insurrection, not very Roman. Yeah, not very Roman to kill your leaders. That never happened by Romans.
Yeah, that happened.
Hey, Roman, what do you know about Roman soldiers and killing their leaders?
That happened to the emperor like a couple times. This is not this happens
Yeah,
sometimes, man.
yeah. Like, no, a centurion, I'm sorry. Somebody above him would have killed him, somebody below him would have killed him. The idea of building a synagogue, yeah, that would like
Now,
Roman culture, are you joking? No,
so
that
the
would not.
only way I can like find myself arguing this way is that there was a sort of syncretic thing going on in the Roman Empire. They didn't like to piss off the gods, even foreign gods. So you could make an argument that they wouldn't have done it over some religious stuff. But I'm not sure I even believe that argument. I'm trying to see it 100%, and I don't quite see a way through this. The sarcasm argument seems reasonable to me.
Yeah. Aaron says Yeshua is pro Gentile, but also pro Jewish. I mean, a centurion. Come on. So, Michael, if the God of Israel is a God of mercy and forgiveness, why wouldn't that be appealing to a murderous Roman with a conscience? I'm not saying there's no centurion who ever thought, you know what, maybe the Jews are right. I am saying that there was no centurion who gave money to a synagogue, built a synagogue, was loved by Jews, and not murdered.
So, like, there are these people like called God-fearers, right? Who were interested in this Jewish thing, and there it was
And
possible
those
to
people
convert.
were despised by and those people were despised by the Roman government and the actual Roman um, a- army. And so, yes, such people did exist. There were people who were friendly to Judaism and even believed Jewish things. These people were persecuted by the Romans. They were not centurions.
Okay. Like is that like on the books? Like, hey, if you convert to Judaism, you can't be emperor or whatever.
Might be. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons people didn't want to get circumcised, was because if you got circumcised, then you could no longer be like accepted into Roman society.
Oh.
But isn't Judaism the obviously true religion and all the rest of us are seeing through a glass darkly? Yes. Yes. I am not saying that in fact, I believe that it is true that some people make estimates, some 50% of people who were going to synagogues were in fact Gentiles. I completely believe that, and I look forward to the day when Gentiles outnumber Jews in synagogues. And I do see that happening one day, in accordance with what it says in Zechariah, I believe. Um,
So there's this like Christian like rabbinically taught guy, uh and he's like, he's ethnically Jewish, but I think he learned like all his Jewish stuff after he became a Christian. And he makes the argument from the New Testament that like Gentiles should keep kosher and stuff like this. It was very
it's called the Hebrew Roots movement.
he didn't seem like a Hebrew roots guy, but he might be a Hebrew roots guy. I don't know. I'm
There's
trying to remember.
Hebrew Roots is big and growing.
Yeah, he didn't seem like because I've seen some of the Hebrew roots stuff. He did not seem like a Hebrew roots guy. He seemed
There are
he seemed
various.
almost like a rabbi.
Okay, so there's 119, dogmatically keeping kosher, or I'm not sure who you're asking about, Caleb. Um, Mazel Tov, Garth. Apparently, it snowed in Minnesota today, which, I mean, it is October.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I know that like there are certain things like keeping the Sabbath is supposed to be like really bad for Gentiles to do, right?
Yes.
I don't know about kosher exactly. It seems like if you tried to keep it like actually like all the midrash and all the specific things, it doesn't even make sense. Like you like all your food is supposed to be cooked by Jewish people, right? So like, what are you doing?
Well, okay, so there is an idea of kashrut which applies to Gentiles, which is at the very least only eating meat that's been slaughtered. And there are people, especially Noahites, who will only buy kosher meat, and to some extent will keep some of the rules of kashrut. It's not necessarily a horrible thing to do, but I have heard multiple times from rabbis that a Gentile should not only eat bacon, but should have us in mind, because God gave you something delicious for you to eat, and prohibiting it on to yourself is a bad idea. Christians are allowed to keep kosher, celebrate the feast festivals, but it is not required. Hebrew roots generally say it is necessary to do. The Okay, we're talking more in. We're not talking so much about Hebrew roots. We're talking more along the lines of Paul in Christianity. I mean, Paul in Judaism, which says that a Jewish Christian should be following the laws, and that's where the Dead Sea Scrolls have been changing people's ideas. And like, okay, Caleb, go back and listen to this from the beginning. Go read, Garth. It was nice talking to you. Yeah.
Okay.
We've been
Is there
going
something
for
you wanna-
like 2 hours. There's a bunch of people watching.
Nice.
Will do. Well, there's 6
Is it-
people watching.
Yeah. Is there something you want to talk about?
I need more water. What?
Is there something you wanted to talk about? You might want to go get water first. I don't know.
I do
what
want
I'm
to get
missing.
water, and I actually want to talk to you offline, like not in front of everybody. So maybe we should do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna end the broadcast. I'm gonna get some water. The two of us can talk, and the rest of you can actually watch the freaking 2-hour video. Bye,
Have fun,
people.
guys. Bye.